Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. In the days preceding Song Junwan's arrival outside his immortal's cave, Bai Xiaochun had pondered what to do regarding her request. He knew that after she emerged from seclusion, she would come looking for him, to ask for his help during the trial by fire for the position of Bloodmaster. For many days, she hadn't come. Just when he was trying to decide whether or not to take the initiative to go see her, he heard her voice. At that point, his eyes glittered, and he cleared his throat. Instead of immediately opening the door of the immortal's cave, he decided to take advantage of the situation to make her wait outside, thus increasing his own perceived value. In truth, he wasn't sure which decision was correct. After all, if he didn't join her, he could take advantage of her absence to attempt to sneak into her immortal's cave and acquire the relic of eternal indestructibility. If he succeeded, then it would definitely be unnecessary for him to participate in the trial by fire. However, that option was also inherently dangerous, so dangerous that it was hard to decide if it was a better choice than the trial by fire. Even as he sat there thinking, the door of his immortal's cave swished open quietly, and Song Junwan stepped inside. Bai Xiaochun was so startled he jumped up and walked backward a few steps. His immortal's cave was protected by a defensive spell formation, and yet Song Junwan had somehow entered despite it. She smiled enigmatically as she looked Bai Xiaochun up and down, almost as if her gaze could pierce into his heart. "I'm the Grand Elder of Middle Peak, and I currently stand in for the Bloodmaster here. I control every blade of grass and every rock. If I want to go into an immortal's cave, nobody can do a thing to stop me. Besides, why would junior brother Nightcrypt refuse to let me into his immortal's cave? Instead of making you say the words, I just decided to take the initiative." With that, she sat down in a stone chair and rested her chin on her palm. Although her gaze wasn't seductive, there was something enticing about it, something that tugged at Bai Xiaochun's heart in shocking fashion. His expression turned somber, and he growled, "Is becoming the Bloodmaster really that important to you?" Song Junwan looked back at him quietly for a moment, then nodded. For many years, the Song clan has administered Middle Peak, and generations of Bloodmasters have all been chosen from our clan. But this time around, things changed. Our patriarch made a deal with Patriarch Limitless, and one of the conditions was that the slut Shui Mei would have a chance to compete for the position of Bloodmaster. In exchange, we got information about Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. Unfortunately, Song Ke failed to live up to expectations, and didn't reach Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. Even worse was that the slut Shui Mei unexpectedly reached 9 tide flows. As of this point, Care is no match for her. Therefore, I am the only person left who has a chance at becoming Bloodmaster. And that is why I need your help. With you as one of my Dharma protectors, I think I have a hope of actually succeeding. With that, Song Junwan waited for Bai Xiaochun's response. Bai Xiaochun didn't say anything at first. After hearing about the details of Shui Mei's involvement, everything made a lot more sense. However, he still felt that the competition for the position would be very dangerous. A long moment passed, and Song Junwan continued, "I wouldn't ask you to help me if it wouldn't benefit you as well. Considering that you're already a Bloodstreak Elder, if I succeed, I will strongly recommend you to be the next Grand Elder." For some reason, she blushed slightly, and the charming seductiveness in her eyes seemed to intensify. It was almost like she were casting her vixen-like claws into Bai Xiaochun in an attempt to drag him in. Bai Xiaochun coughed lightly and averted his gaze. Inside, he was still trying to decide what would be best. If he didn't participate in the trial by fire, there was always the chance that he could secretly acquire the relic of eternal indestructibility. Although making that attempt would be a big risk, participating in the trial by fire would be equally risky. In one situation, he would have almost no control over how things played out. In the other, he would have a bit of control. In one scenario, here was a high chance of success despite the danger. In the other, the chances of success weren't as high, but were still good. It took some time, but he made his choice. Gritting his teeth inwardly, he looked at Song Junwan and said, "If you want to become Bloodmaster, then of course I'll help you. However, I'd like to know a bit about the trial by fire. How exactly does the process work? How do you become a Bloodmaster?" He had already decided that, even though he would attempt to help Song Junwan, his own safety was paramount. Perhaps by being careful, he could reduce the dangerous elements. Song Junwan was already glowing with excitement. Eyes shining, she looked at Bai Xiaochun, a smile growing on her face that she covered with her hand. Expression softening, she said, "To many people, the details of this trial by fire are a big secret. But I won't hide anything from you. To begin with, I have to be clear. In every trial by fire, death is a common thing. Although Bai Xiaochun had been prepared for news like this, it didn't stop his heart from suddenly beginning to pound. Every time he heard the word death, he would get anxious. One reason for that is that the trial by fire isn't held in the outside world, but rather, in the world beneath our feet. Although she was speaking quietly, her words struck Bai Xiaochun like lightning. Beneath our feet? Stunned, Bai Xiaochun looked down at the ground. It only took a moment for it to dawn on him what she meant, whereupon his eyes widened, and he gasped. Song Junwan smiled at his reaction. Back when you first arrived at the Bloodstream sect, you noticed how the sect itself resembles an enormous hand, right? The Bloodstream sect really is built on top of a huge hand. That hand belongs to a giant that is submerged beneath the surface of the Heavenspan River. Over the years, the various techniques of the Bloodstream sect were all created after studying the hand. We also came to call the giant our blood ancestor. A passionate, worshipful gleam appeared in Song Junwan's eyes, as if the matter she was discussing was the most important thing in the world. She wasn't the only person who would view the subject in this way, virtually everyone in the Bloodstream sect did. Bai Xiaochun blinked, but didn't say anything in response. The blood ancestor was a giant, but just like us, possessed flesh and blood, a skeleton, as well as the 5 yin organs and 6 yang organs. Anyone who wants to become a blood master must gain the approval of the blood ancestor. That approval comes in the form of crystals, which grow in the organs of the blood ancestor. On Middle Peak's Bloodmaster Temple, there is an entrance that leads to the interior of Middle Peak itself. By following the blood vessels inside the finger, we can enter the body of the blood ancestor. Each of the mountain peaks corresponds with one of the 5 yin organs, with Middle Peak connecting to the heart. The blood crystals there are the goal. The first person to get the blood crystal wins the approval of Middle Peak, and can call upon the power of the blood chi of the entire peak. They will gain the ability to suppress the cultivation bases of all cultivators there, and even more impressive, raise all cultivators' battle prowess. That is a bloodmaster. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. He was more shocked than ever by what he was learning. Although he had understood a bit about bloodmasters, as of now, he realized how truly high of a position they occupied. The difference between a mountain peak with a bloodmaster and a mountain peak without one was so vast that it couldn't be put into words. I heard a story once. Bai Xiaochun said, "You mean the legend of the blood devil?" Song Junwan replied immediately, smiling. Bai Xiaochun nodded. That legend stems from conclusions reached over generations of research by the patriarchs. They all believe that somewhere in the blood ancestor's body is a legacy blood crystal. Whoever gets that legacy won't become a bloodmaster, but rather, the blood devil, a position far higher than the bloodmasters. In fact, that position is even above the patriarchs. Because the Bloodstream sect practices spirit blood cultivation, if the blood devil appears, speculation states that a single thought on his part could reduce the cultivation bases of the entire sect by 50%, from the outer sect all the way to the patriarchs. At the same time, a single thought on his part could increase the battle prowess of the entire sect by 30%. Simply describing a person like that as the blood devil isn't quite sufficient, so another term exists, a term known only to a select few in the sect. In fact, only the patriarchs of the top clans in the sect are aware of it. Blood Lord. She spoke the words softly, but they seemed to contain great power. But legends are just that. Legends. Throughout the years, generations of patriarchs have searched through the body of the blood ancestor. Despite having searched most of the locations, they haven't found any legacy. I hope that one day while I'm still alive, I'll be able to see the Bloodlord rise up. Even the patriarchs are well aware that once the Bloodlord comes, he will either lead the Bloodstream sect to unheard of glory, or drag it down into ruin. Because of that, some of the patriarchs hope the Bloodlord never comes. As for my Song clan patriarch, he is not among that group. Song Junwan smiled. But enough about legends. Let's talk about the trial by fire itself. Your main purpose in coming along is to help me get the blood crystal. The most important factors leading up to that point are battle prowess and speed. Along with the other Dharma protectors, you must protect me, and help me beat Shui Mei to the heart cavity. As long as I can get to the heart cavity first, that blood crystal will be mine. Song Junwan's eyes gleamed with self-confidence. How many Dharma protectors will there be? Bai Xiaochun asked. Both Shui Mei and I can bring up to 20 Dharma protectors. Song Junwan replied placidly. That many? Bai Xiaochun said, a bit shocked. What if one of the Dharma protectors gets to the heart cavity before you? Theoretically speaking, any of the Dharma protectors could become a blood master. All they would have to do would be to get to the heart cavity first, take the blood crystal, and absorb it. Bai Xiaochun blinked. If what Song Junwan said was true, then how could she prevent that very scenario from playing out? Presumably, she would have some method of retaining control other than being very particular about which Dharma protectors she selected. Song Junwan chuckled lightly, but didn't offer any further detailed explanation. Much as Bai Xiaochun had suspected, both she and Shui Mei both had methods of retaining control, special command medallions given them by their respective patriarchs. Only someone with the command medallion would actually be able to enter the heart cavity. After a moment of contemplation, Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth and looked down at the ground. He wasn't interested in fighting to get the Bloodmaster title. After all, he wasn't even a real disciple of the Bloodstream sect. He just wanted to get into the Grand Elder's Immortals cave. Therefore, he needed to help Song Junwan become Bloodmaster, so that he could become Grand Elder. That would solve all the problems perfectly. Bai Xiaochun had already been in the Bloodstream sect for years now, and at long last, his goal was in sight. With that, he looked up and said, "I'll be there tomorrow morning at Bloodmaster Temple." Song Junwan took a deep breath and looked at Bai Xiaochun, her eyes glittering. Covering a smile with her hand, she took a step forward, then leaned forward and spoke into his ear, her lips nearly touching him, her warm breath caressing the side of his face. "If you become Grand Elder, there are many things that could happen between us." Suddenly, her face flushed, as if she weren't sure why she had suddenly spoken those words. With a final piercing look at Bai Xiaochun, she glided away. The vixen makes another move. A fragrant, silky aroma entered Bai Xiaochun's nose, causing a mysterious sensation to pulse through him. Anxious and more on guard than ever, he watched Song Junwan leave. "This isn't gonna work," he thought, sighing. "One of these days, that vixen is going to go in for the kill. I might have incredible willpower, I might be an amazing fighter, I might have numerous, uncountable outstanding qualities, but this vixen is just too dangerous." After taking some time to calm down, he sighed again. Whatever. Once I get the relic of eternal indestructibility, I'll go back to the Spirit Stream sect, and then things will be fine. Besides, I've been missing Xiaomei lately." Settling down cross-legged, he meditated until the following morning. Then, his eyes snapped open. His cultivation base was at its peak, and he was full of energy as he emerged from his Immortals cave. 1. By Xiaomei, he's referring to Hu Xiaomei. Everything comes down to this. Chin stuck up, he proceeded along proudly. As he did, many cultivators saw him, and bowed their heads deferentially. This was his first time appearing in public with his Bloodstreak battle robe, which had been sent over a few days earlier from Lesser Marsh Peak. Only Bloodstreak elders could wear Bloodstreak battle robes, which had built-in magical devices that could defend against an attack from a core formation expert. Such robes could only be produced at significant cost. Nightcrypt's handsome face combined with the Bloodstreak battle robe created quite an eye-catching scene. Many people looked over with awe and reverence on their faces. Bai Xiaochun enjoyed being treated in such a way, and even slowed down a bit as he flew through the air toward the upper finger. Eventually, he landed in front of Bloodmaster Temple, where a large group of people had already gathered. Song Junwan and Shui Mei's groups were clearly separated, and the two women were staring at each other coldly. Shui Mei had 20 cultivators backing her, all of whom were awe-inspiring late Foundation establishment experts. Their expressions were placid, but they radiated intense, murderous auras. Not every person in the group was considered chosen, but they were all practiced killers who were famous even outside the sect. The reason why people like this would be Dharma protectors for Shui Mei actually had a lot to do with the fact that her father was Patriarch Limitless. Song Junwan also had a formidable group gathered behind her, including Song Ke. Most were direct bloodline clan members of the Song clan. All of Middle Peak's Bloodstreak elders were gathered, as were many other ordinary cultivators. Once the trial by fire began, they would all be waiting for the new Bloodmaster to come out. Several blurry figures could be seen floating up above, and from the pressure that weighed down from them, it was obvious that they were patriarchs of the sect. There were 4 of them, 2 of whom Bai Xiaochun had only seen once before, during the Grand Lich summoning ritual. The other 2 were more familiar, the Song Clan Patriarch and Patriarch Limitless. When Bai Xiaochun arrived, the Song Clan Patriarch saw him and gave him a glare. Shivering, Bai Xiaochun ducked his head and hurried over to Song Junwan. As he did, Song Ke looked at him and chuckled coldly. "You can't do anything right, can you? You even managed to show up late for the trial by fire. If you're scared of dying, why don't you just stay home?" Yawning, Bai Xiaochun looked over, making sure to drag his eyes slowly over Song Q's recently regrown hair and eyebrows. "As naughty as ever, aren't we, Care? You?" Song Ke growled through gritted teeth. Glaring at Bai Xiaochun, he was about to say more when Song Junwan intervened with a cold snort. Enough, she said, both of you shut your mouths. If you want to argue, I'll personally arrange for it to happen, after the trial by fire. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times. Considering the somewhat oppressive atmosphere at the moment, he decided not to say anything else. Up in midair, the Song clan Patriarch and Patriarch Limitless exchanged a bemused glance. Then, Patriarch Limitless looked over the crowd and said, "Let the trial by fire for the position of Middle Peak Blood Master begin." Patriarch Limitless then performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and waved his finger toward Bloodmaster Temple. Bloodmaster Temple began to rumble, and then a huge crevice opened up in the square outside the temple. Strong blood chi erupted out, along with intense, pulsing coldness and blinding blood-colored light. It almost looked like an enormous mouth ready to consume anything that came near. However, closer inspection would reveal that the blood-colored light was anything but ordinary. It was possible to see other worlds inside of that light. Apparently, if you stepped inside of it, you would be sucked into one of those blood-colored worlds. The instant the crevice opened, one of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors stepped forward, his cold eyes radiating killing intent. After looking over derisively at the people gathered behind Song Junwan, he stepped into the crevice and vanished. One after another, all of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors stepped forward and entered the crevice. Last to enter was Shui Mei, who cast a cold glare at Song Junwan and her group before vanishing. As the others were stepping into the crevice, Song Junwan lowered her voice and gave her Dharma protectors more information about the endless world of blood. The first stage of the Blood Master trial by fire is called the Endless World of Blood. Shui Mei and I will not be able to pass through the first stage. It is only for you Dharma protectors. The body of the blood ancestor is a place that not just anyone can enter. The first stage tests the qualifications of the Dharma protectors that the two of us have selected. It will also determine exactly how many Dharma protectors will be able to proceed to the second stage. In order to enter the body of the blood ancestor, you have to become one with him. Although he is dead, there are still parts of him which contain life force. You must convince those living systems within the blood ancestor that you are one of them. Only then can you avoid being expelled. Within that crevice are numerous worlds, each one of which can only be entered by 2 people at a time. Shui Mei's Dharma protectors have taken the initiative to select which worlds they will go into. As for you all, when you enter the crevice, you will automatically be dragged into one of those worlds with them. Once inside, you and the other Dharma protector will vie for the approval of the world. Those who succeed will be able to proceed to the second stage. Those who fail will be ejected. Not only must you be on guard against Shui Mei's Dharma protectors, you must also watch out for the blood beasts within the world. They aren't intelligent, but they are completely and utterly bloodthirsty. I'll be waiting for you at the entrance to the second stage. With that, she clasped hands and bowed to the assembled group. Song Ke nodded back at her, his expression somber. Then he looked at Night Crypt, snorted coldly, and strode over to the crevice. Moments later, he was gone, and the rest of the group began to enter. After a brief moment of hesitation, Bai Xiaochun gritted his teeth and leapt into the crevice. Almost instant, a beam of blood-colored light swept over him, and he felt a massive force tugging at him. He completely lost control of his own body as he was sucked into the light. Although the light didn't necessarily seem impressive from the outside, once it wrapped around him, he felt as if he were floating in a huge sea. As he was sucked along, he moved toward the end of that sea, where he saw an enormous, blood-colored sphere. There were other spheres visible, all of which had people floating toward them. As the people neared the spheres, they were swallowed up. Bai Xiaochun was frightened, and looked away from all the spheres. However, it was in that moment that something strange occurred. All of the blood spheres suddenly trembled, and then sent out even more blood-colored light, all of which shone onto Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun wasn't sure if he was mistaken or not, but it almost seemed as if the blood spheres all wanted to be able to select him in particular. There were even some blood spheres which were empty, having not been selected by any of Shui Mei's Dharma protectors, which were also quivering, as if with anticipation. Bai Xiaochun felt his nervousness mounting, but before he could react, the first blood sphere to have reached out to him seemed to go mad. Before he could get close, it actually flew toward him, then slammed into him, seemingly delighted. Bai Xiaochun's vision went black, and he was sucked into the body of the sphere. When things began to clear up, he found himself in a strange world. The sky was the color of the blood, the ground was the color of blood, everything was the color of blood, even the mountains and the plants. So weird, he thought, looking around vigilantly. The more he considered what had occurred, the stranger it seemed. After some thought, he decided it must have had something to do with his undying live forever technique. Could it be that I'm like a god in this place, and that's why all the blood spheres seemed to go crazy? His eyes turned up in thought, and he cleared his throat. Then he cast his senses about, and was sure that he could sense the presence of a powerful will, a will that seemed filled with desire, something that was calling out to him. One of Shuimei's Dharma protectors is also in this place. I need to be careful. All of them are in late Foundation establishment. He looked around again, vigilance mounting as he flew up into the air. The more he flew along, the stranger things seemed. It was almost like he didn't need to use any cultivation base power to fly. The wind simply carried him along. He didn't even see any blood beasts, to the point where he started wondering if they even existed here. The entire world, including the sky and the land, was the color of blood. Plants, trees, mountains, everything was crimson as far as the eye could see. Off in the distance was a blood-colored desert, and the very end of which was an oasis which was also the color of blood, that led to an ocean. In the middle of that ocean was a mountain, the peak of which pierced the clouds. That mountain was where the will of the world was located, and whichever cultivator climbed it first would win the approval and blessing of the world. That person would then be able to leave, with the approval of the blood ancestor, and qualified to enter the second stage. There were countless worlds inside of the blood ancestor, but Shuimei and Song Junwan had both brought 20 Dharma protectors. Of the total of 40 Dharma protectors, in the end, only 20 would be qualified to proceed. Obviously, the number of Dharma protectors who Shuimei and Song Junwan ended up with would determine who had the advantage in the second stage. Shuimei's Dharma protectors had entered the crevice first, and the one who had selected this particular world was a gaunt, middle-aged man with cold eyes. His cultivation base fluctuations were those of late Foundation establishment, and overall, he looked like a viper ready to strike at any moment. Clearly, whoever ended up in his sights would likely end up dead. This man was Jia Lai, and in terms of battle prowess, he could be considered among the top 3 in Shuimei's group of Dharma protectors. He was completely and utterly confident of being able to dominate any of Song Junwan's Dharma protectors, with the exception of 1 or 2. Although he appeared to be middle-aged, he was actually over 100 years old. However, because of the unique techniques he cultivated, his fleshly body was at the ultimate peak. Furthermore, he'd been able to add a full 60-year cycle to his longevity during his Foundation establishment trial by fire. He had reached 5 tide flows, had an incredibly powerful cultivation base, and was an adept killer. This world is like a blessed land for me, he thought, looking off into the distance. He was currently gripping a blood-colored sea snake by the head. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't free himself, and if Jia Lai wanted to, he could crush it to death in an instant. Jia Lai completely ignored the snake as he looked at the towering mountain not too far off in the distance. He already felt somewhat amused by this first stage of the trial by fire for Bloodmaster. He'd only just arrived in the huge world, and yet, he was already relatively close to the location of the world's will. The reflection of the vast ocean and the towering mountain could be seen in his eyes, as well as the pulsing fluctuations which spread out from the mountain. Even if Song Junwan's Dharma protector gets lucky, there's no way he could get as close as I am. I might as well just take control of the will of this world right now. I won't even need to kill the other Dharma protector. I wonder who it is. Night Crypt maybe. He chuckled coldly. Originally, he had planned to kill Song Junwan's Dharma protector and then earn the approval of the will of the world. But now it seemed that might not be necessary. Blurring into motion, he sped out over the blood-colored ocean, quickly closing in on the cloud-wreathed mountain. He proceeded along with caution, and as such, wasn't taken by surprise when an intense roaring sound shook everything in the area. A moment later, a huge blood-colored dragon sped out from the other side of the mountain, fixed its eyes on Jia Lai, and then sped toward him rapidly. It was more than 30 meters long, and bristled with a murderous aura. A sense of intense crisis gripped Jia Lai, and beads of sweat popped out on his forehead. Eyes widening, he exclaimed, "Impossible. How could a blood beast like that be in this place? Foundation establishment cultivators can't fight something like that." Even as he gasped in shock, more roars could be heard, and the auras of more blood beasts exploded from the vicinity of the mountain. Something like a powerful wind blasted out, causing the blood ocean to churn and seethe. Moments later, countless murderous eyes appeared beneath the surface of the water. There were so many that anyone who saw them would be shocked. Before Jia Lai could proceed any further, the blood beasts beneath the surface of the water joined the blood beasts from the mountain to attack him. The sheer number of blood beasts Jia Lai saw caused his scalp to tingle in shock and fear. Not daring to proceed, he actually fell back. After he retreated by about 3,000 meters, the enormous dragon slowly turned around, the auras of the other blood beasts slowly faded, and even the creatures beneath the surface of the water disappeared. Zhao Lai's face was covered with sweat, and his breath came in ragged pants. Despite the supreme confidence he had in his cultivation base, to be stared at by so many blood beasts left him scared out of his mind. After a bit of time passed, he frowned anxiously. With so many blood beasts here, it won't be easy to go any further. I guess I'll just need to wait for the right opportunity to present itself before I move onward. Gritting his teeth, he backed up a bit more, and then found a place to conceal himself and let time pass. During the 7 days which followed, he saw quite a few blood beasts coming and going. Finally, the killing intent in his eyes flared. Forget it, things aren't going to change here anytime soon. Instead of waiting around, I might as well go find Song Junwan's Dharma protector and kill him. Then I'll have plenty of time to wait around. Maybe if I'm lucky, my opponent will be Nightcrypt, and I can save a bit of effort by getting rid of him now. Looking at the ocean of blood which stretched out behind him, he chuckled coldly. Being an adept killer, he was naturally a skilled hunter as well. He had keen senses, and although the world he was in was large, he was confident that with his cultivation base, it would be no difficult task for him to track down the other Dharma protector. Blurring into motion, he flew off to begin the search. Before he got very far, though, the sea down below seethed, and a huge blood beast burst out from the depths. It had the torso of a human and the tail of a fish, and as soon as it appeared, it attacked Zhao Lai with bloodthirsty violence. After a short battle, Zhao Lai killed the blood beast and proceeded along. However, before he could get very far, 2 more blood beasts burst out from the water to attack him. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun was flying through the air, marveling at how strange and quiet the world was. Despite having been flying along for a few days, he hadn't seen a single blood beast. Everything around him seemed to be completely empty. He didn't even need to use his cultivation base. The wind simply pushed him along. Of course, the strangeness of the situation put him more on guard than ever. Something really weird is going on with this place, he thought. And where is Shuimei's Dharma protector? I wonder if he set up an ambush for me since he got here first. He continued to look around vigilantly as he proceeded. Eventually, he reached the desert. By that time, Zhao Lai was fleeing in terror across the blood ocean, chased by several thousand maddened blood beasts. His face was pale white, and his expression was that of terror. Damn it, why are there so many blood beasts? I didn't provoke them, and yet they're showing up one after another. They're like a flood. Before long, the 10th day passed. The more time that passed, the more Bai Xiaochun felt as if something really strange were going on. He still hadn't even seen the slightest trace of a blood beast, but distinctly recalled Song Junwan saying such bloodthirsty creatures existed here. At this point, he was starting to wonder what exactly was going on. Eventually, he caught sight of the end of the desert, with the blood-colored oasis and the blood-colored ocean. His astonishment grew, as did his caution. By now, Zhao Lai's hair was disheveled, his skin sallow, and his eyes bloodshot. At long last, he burst out of the ocean region and into the oasis. After numerous dangerous encounters, he had finally made it out alive. When he thought back to everything that had occurred in the ocean, he was filled with a sense of awe and dread regarding the world around him. It's a good thing I had all those life-saving magics and items, otherwise I probably would have died. However, if things were that difficult for me, then it's probably the same with Song Junwan's Dharma protector. In fact, maybe he already got eaten by the blood beasts. He looked back out at the ocean, heart still thumping with fear. Just when he was about to sit down and rest, his heart trembled, and he looked off into the distance, where a beam of light could be seen flying lazily through the air. A cold light flashed through Zhao Lai's eyes, and he quickly reined in the power of his cultivation base. At the same time, he produced a pearl, which let out a soft, warm light that completely concealed his aura. Unless he suddenly unleashed the power of his cultivation base, that pearl would make it almost impossible to detect him. It was one of the life-saving items that had enabled him to make it out of the ocean of blood alive. After activating it, he stood there unmoving, looking up into the sky. Nightcrypt? Ha ha ha, it's really him. Eyes flashing with killing intent, he began to chuckle. Although Nightcrypt was very famous, Zhao Lai felt nothing but disdain for him. So what if you can concoct some medicine and please the patriarchs? You really think you're a chosen? Even with your inverse blood ancestral awakening, you're only in mid-mortal Dao Foundation establishment. I can kill you as easily as flipping over my hand. By cutting you down, I can accomplish the mission assigned to me by the Blood Master of Lesser Marsh Peak. Completely calm and confident, he pulled in his murderous aura and decided to wait for the right moment to attack. Bai Xiaochun proceeded along cautiously. He didn't move very fast, and kept his divine sense spread out in all directions. As he got close to the blood-colored oasis, he was about to fly over it when he looked down. Although he hadn't opened his third eye, his intuition told him that the place harbored danger. Without the slightest hesitation, he backed up. Zhao Lai was surprised that Night Crypt would have such acute senses. He gave a cold laugh. Considering how powerful his own cultivation base was, he decided that there was no need to hide any longer. He leapt up into the air, shooting directly toward Night Crypt, his murderous aura exploding around him. Night Crypt, I'm Zhao Lai, and you're dead. Laughing loudly, he shot forth accompanied by rumbles like that of thunder. His right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and he waved his finger, causing a huge blood-colored hand to appear, which sped directly toward Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun's eyes widened. Zhao Lai had stuck out among Shui Mei's Dharma protectors earlier, so he recognized him. His attack burst with powerful energy, and it only took a moment for Bai Xiaochun to realize that this was a formidable opponent. Your cultivation base is higher than mine, but you were lying in wait to ambush me, he exclaimed loudly. How shameless. Despicable. I hate your type. People like you should be struck by lightning. Bai Xiaochun was very angry, and was just about to unleash an attack, when suddenly his eyes widened with disbelief. Zhao Lai likewise was completely astonished by what happened next. Almost as soon as the words left Bai Xiaochun's mouth, Zhao Lai had laughed in response, and sent his blood-colored hand shooting forward. But then, without any warning whatsoever, a deafening boom filled the sky, and a bolt of lightning appeared, as thick as a bucket. Before Zhao Lai even had a chance to react, it slammed into him. As the boom echoed out, Bai Xiaochun's jaw dropped. Zhao Lai cried out in alarm, and the blood-colored hand was destroyed. Before Bai Xiaochun could do anything, a second lightning bolt appeared, then a third and a fourth, all of which shot directly toward Zhao Lai. Zhao Lai screamed at the top of his lungs as the lightning smashed into him, causing blood to spray out of his mouth. At the same time, a look of utter incredulity could be seen on his face. What's going on? He bellowed in rage, simultaneously backing up as fast as possible. What divine ability is this, Night Crypt? Then he glanced up into the sky, and his scalp almost exploded from shock when he realized that a whole string of lightning bolts had appeared, over 100 of them, and they were all beginning to descend toward him. No. Zhao Lai screamed miserably and abandoned any thoughts of tangling with Bai Xiaochun at the moment. He slapped the top of his head, causing an ancient, dilapidated buckler to pop out of his mouth, which provided a modicum of protection as he fled. However, the more than 100 lightning bolts continued to slam down, and although the buckler managed to block them, Zhao Lai was still left coughing up blood. The last dozen or so lightning bolts were too much for the shield, which shattered. Coughing up more blood, Zhao Lai withered visibly. At that point, he pulled out a paper talisman, which he ignited, increasing his speed dramatically. With that, he sped off into the distance. Bai Xiaochun hovered there, jaw hanging open. He hadn't even had a chance to unleash an attack. All he'd done was say something. It was a completely shocking and unfathomable scene. In the mere moments in which Zhao Lai closed in on him, he was struck by over 100 bolts of lightning, and then fled with his tail between his legs. Despite that, Bai Xiaochun chose to do the cautious thing and just let him run. Taking a deep breath, he looked up into the sky, and then looked at Zhao Lai fleeing into the distance. Blinking, he suddenly started to get excited. Could it be that, without even my knowledge, my cultivation base has reached the point where I can kill someone with a mere word? The idea excited him, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't very likely. After some more thought, he decided that it was either a coincidence or something to do with the undying live forever technique. In fact, he was actually hoping Zhao Lai would show up again so that he could analyze the matter further. Filled with curiosity and anticipation, he slowly flew out over the ocean of blood. Meanwhile, some distance away from Bai Xiaochun, Zhao Lai finally came to a stop in an area close to the ocean. He had blood dripping down his chin, and his eyes burned with madness. However, within that madness could be seen fear, and even terror. As of this moment, he was absolutely convinced that the lightning which had struck him was not one of Night Crypt's divine abilities. How did he do it? Damn it, how exactly did he do it? How did he get so much lightning to strike me? Wait, I know. Night Crypt is also known as Plague Devil. He's vicious and merciless, as well as a profound schemer. He must have realized that I planned to ambush him, then figured out a way to cause anyone who neared him to get struck by lightning. Even after more thought, he decided that this was the only possible theory that made sense. Although he wasn't absolutely convinced, he was having a hard time coming up with other ideas. Maybe it had something to do with that oasis. The area where it borders the desert had some unstable fluctuations. Maybe my sudden appearance and the unleashing of my cultivation base disturbed some natural law. As an apothecary, Nightcrypt knows a lot more about those kinds of things than me. Maybe he took advantage of that to cause the lightning. Jia gritted his teeth, and his killing intent began to rise even higher than before. I refuse to believe that if I prepare well enough, you'll escape my next attack. I'm going to hack you to pieces. You'll die in complete and utter torment. Jia had never suffered in such unlucky fashion, and it took him quite a bit of time to calm down. I'm going to sacrifice a bit of my cultivation base to completely conceal my life force and aura. With that level of concealment, nobody in the Foundation establishment stage will be able to detect me without getting within 300 meters of me. He gritted his teeth, and suddenly his face turned red and his body withered. Then he began to slink forward stealthily. It took him about 3 days to track down Bai Xiaochun, who was currently flying around over the ocean. As he flew, his passage kicked up gentle waves, and yet, not a single blood beast could be seen anywhere. Bai Xiaochun was actually very interested in what the blood beasts looked like, and yet, still hadn't had a chance to see one. As he flew along, bored out of his mind, he suddenly noticed the air rippling and distorting about 300 meters to his left. Even as he turned his head, he saw Jia suddenly materialize. Jia threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Eyes bloodshot, he summoned a blood mist that completely covered him and then transformed into a gigantic, vicious head that lunged toward Bai Xiaochun as if to consume him. Time to die, Nightcrypt. Considering how close he was, it only took a moment for the blood mist head to be just up ahead of Bai Xiaochun. Before Bai Xiaochun could react, and before the blood mist head could actually reach him, brightly colored light flashed through heaven and earth, wind screamed, and rain began to pour down. Then, an indescribably powerful gale sprang up right in front of Bai Xiaochun. The wind even caused the ocean water to rise up in shocking fashion. It smashed into the blood mist head, which shuddered for a moment before exploding to reveal the screaming Jia. Impossible. How are you doing this, Nightcrypt? He was completely helpless as the mighty wind swept him away, shredding his clothing, ripping at his skin until blood flowed. In that critical moment, Jia pulled out a life-saving magical item which teleported him away just before he was torn to pieces. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. Moments ago, he had only been about 60 meters away from Jia, and yet the mighty wind and the surging ocean hadn't even moved a single hair on his head. That 60-meter distance was like the gap between heaven and earth. Bai Xiaochun watched mutely as Jia was swept away in terrifying fashion. If he didn't understand what was happening by this point, he wouldn't be Bai Xiaochun. This world is protecting me? We're related because of the undying live forever technique, so it's helping me? Moved, he looked around at the world, and was more convinced than ever that this was the case. Excited, he stuck his chin up and then swished his sleeve. With the snap of a finger, I, Bai Xiaochun, can reduce measly Foundation establishment cultivators to ashes. The pride he felt cleansed him of any nervousness. With that, he flew in grand fashion up into the air, sighing emotionally. Meanwhile, quite a distance away, Jia was coughing up mouthfuls of blood. By this point, he was on the verge of going crazy. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Enraged to the point of trembling, he simply couldn't accept the situation. First there was the lightning, and then that wind. Just how is Nightcrypt doing it all? Don't tell me this world is actually taking care of him? I refuse to believe it. I refuse to accept it. Then he coughed up another mouthful of blood. Eyes completely bloodshot, he looked down at his injured and damaged body, and was relieved to see that his bag of holding was still clutched tight in his right hand. He put on a new set of clothing, killing intent surging. His hatred for Bai Xiaochun had reached the point where he couldn't bear to live under the same sky as him. Gritting his teeth, he pulled a small statue out of his bag of holding. The statue depicted an evil ghost, completely vicious in appearance. After a moment of hesitation, Jia bit the tip of his tongue and spit some blood onto the statue. The statue immediately melted, transforming into a black liquid that then took the shape of a magical symbol, which flew up and branded itself onto Jia's forehead. Jia shuddered, then let out a piercing cry as the magical symbol spread out from his forehead, transforming into a black suit of armor. In the blink of an eye, the armor covered his entire body, healing his wounds, and causing his gaunt figure to suddenly ripple with muscles. Closer inspection would reveal that the transformation was partly corporeal and partly illusory. The Lesser Marsh Peak Bloodmaster gave me this ghost body. It will temporarily restore my cultivation base, and even advance it a bit. Nightcrypt's bizarre abilities won't do any good against the ghost body. I already understand his lightning, and although I don't really get that wind, I can now attack him from under the water. Plus, the ghost body can pass right through the wind. Nightcrypt, I refuse to believe that this world is taking care of you. And even if it is, I can defy the heavens and kill you. Gritting his teeth, he reined in his cultivation base and then dove down into the water, where he sped along at top speed. 3 days later, Bai Xiaochun was still flying around over the blood ocean. He could sense that, off in the distance, there were strange fluctuations which were obviously coming from the location of the world's will. I wonder why that Jia Lai hasn't shown up over the past few days. Bai Xiaochun actually missed him a bit. Every time he showed up, it was a chance to see how the world would protect him. Because of his anticipation, he made sure to fly along even more slowly than usual. On the evening of the third day, when the blood-colored sky was starting to grow dark, the seawater beneath Bai Xiaochun suddenly exploded with a shocking aura. Water showered up into the air, along with raging killing intent and a powerful roar. Prepare to die, Nightcrypt. It was a voice filled with indescribable hatred, and along with it, a black armored figure appeared. It was Jia Lai, who seemed to flicker between corporeal and illusory. As he flew out of the water, he rapidly increased his speed, shooting directly toward Bai Xiaochun. All of the power of Jia Lai's late Foundation establishment cultivation base exploded out. That, coupled with the boost provided by the ghost body armor, put him incomparably close to the great circle of Foundation establishment, and caused intense pressure to weigh down in all directions. Bai Xiaochun was delighted, and as Jia Lai closed in, he stuck his chin up and waved his sleeve. Pointing at Jia Lai, he said, "Back off." To see Bai Xiaochun posing in such a way enraged Jia Lai even more, and caused him to accelerate even more rapidly. By this point, he was already about 9 meters away from Bai Xiaochun, and not even a lightning bolt could intervene quickly enough to stop him. As far as he was concerned, Nightcrypt was going to die, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Mouth twisting into a vicious smile, he cried, "Like hell all." However, before he could even finish his sentence, a blood-colored hand suddenly shot up from the sea down below. It moved with indescribable quickness, forming a palm that slapped Jia Lai like a human would a mosquito. A resounding smack could be heard. Jia Lai's black armor shattered, and blood sprayed out of his mouth. The bitterness of his scream would shock to the core anyone who could have heard it. No. Despairing, Jia Lai coughed up a mouthful of blood as he tumbled away. His body was already on the verge of exploding, and his recently recovered cultivation base power was instantly damaged. He was now weaker than ever. Bai Xiaochun gasped and blinked a few times as the enormous blood hand sank back down into the water. As Jia Lai spun away off into the distance, Bai Xiaochun's expression turned into one of admiration. "You're really persistent, aren't you?" Sighing, he proceeded along, looking forward to the next time Jia Lai showed up. Off in the distance, Jia Lai hovered above the ocean water, looking confused, tears of frustration welling up in his eyes. Throughout all his years of cultivation, he had always shed blood, never tears. And yet, here he was, crying. In his perspective, this world was completely and utterly evil. All he wanted to do was kill Nightcrypt. As a result, he had been struck by lightning, flayed by wind, and then slapped by some terrifying bloodbeast. By this point, he was starting to think that it would take a miracle for him to get out of this place alive. My cultivation base is higher than his. I've been in the bloodstream sect for much longer. Why is this world treating me like this? Tears continued to flow down his cheeks. From the moment he had entered this world, he had felt like he was in a living nightmare. By this point, he was completely and utterly terrified of Nightcrypt, and couldn't have been convinced by anybody to try to provoke him. Furthermore, he completely hated the Blood Master of Lesser Marsh Peak, as well as Shui Mei. The only reason he was here was because of Shui Mei. Otherwise, he would never have been forced to tangle with Nightcrypt, nor would he have accepted the mission from the Lesser Marsh Peak Blood Master. He wouldn't have attempted to kill Nightcrypt so many times, and wouldn't have ended up in this state, targeted by the very world around him. This isn't fair. Jia Lai was actually quite close to the mountain peak, and the will of the world. However, there were so many blood beasts on the mountain that he obviously had no hope of even getting near it. As Jia Lai despaired, Bai Xiaochun was flying casually through the air some distance away. Looking at the mountain in front of him, he felt the strong sensation that all he had to do was head up to the top of the mountain, and he would be able to pass the first stage of the trial by fire. However, even as he closed in, the same huge dragon from before stuck its head out from behind the mountain and stared at Bai Xiaochun. At the same time, countless terrifying auras surged out from the mountain itself, locking down onto Bai Xiaochun. Apparently, if he got any closer, all of those blood beasts would charge into action. Bai Xiaochun stopped in place. Earlier, he'd only caught a glimpse of that huge hand, but now that he could actually see the blood beasts face to face, he realized that they looked very much like the kind of wild beasts you might see in the outside world. The only difference was that they were completely the color of blood. Actually, they seemed similar to bane beasts in certain ways. Unexpectedly, the blood beasts were looking at Bai Xiaochun with animosity, which caused the despairing Jia Lai to suddenly go wild with joy. Panting, his eyes widened, and hope gleamed therein. He can't get onto the mountain either. Jia Lai exclaimed excitedly. At last, his chance had arrived. Quickly covering up his aura, he fixed his eyes on Bai Xiaochun and began to search for another opportunity to snatch victory. Bai Xiaochun felt a headache coming on as he looked at the mountain full of blood beasts. After a moment of hesitation, he decided that the best thing to do would be to test out how much the world would protect him. Having made his decision, he carefully proceeded forward. If the blood beasts reacted too violently, then he could always retreat. He slowly got closer and closer, until he actually stepped onto the mountain itself. That was when he really started to get nervous. However, the nervousness quickly began to fade as he realized that the blood beasts were just looking at him, and none of them were moving to block his path. Joy rising, he began to stroll forward, completely unhindered. Meanwhile, Jia Lai hovered over the ocean, eyes wide with shock. Moments later, a thoughtful expression appeared in his eyes, and then hesitation, and finally, an intense glowing light. I get it now. Although there are a lot of blood beasts here, as long as you don't exude any killing intent, the blood beasts won't interfere. That's definitely how to do it. For example, here I am floating on the surface of the ocean, right next to the mountain, and yet none of the blood beasts under the water are attacking me. It's obviously because I have no killing intent. Jia Lai still felt a bit hesitant and unconvinced. However, if he gave up at this point, his newfound hope would be dashed. Therefore, he clenched his jaw and flew up into the air with an expression of determination. Making sure he had no killing intent, he proceeded forward with the utmost caution. Soon he was nearing the mountain, and the numerous blood beasts turned their gazes upon him. Jia Lai stopped in place, scalp tingling, limbs trembling. However, he forced a smile onto his face. No ill will here, he said. I'm just passing through. However, in the instant he opened his mouth, the enormous, blood-colored dragon suddenly howled, flying up into the air and then charging down toward Jia Lai. At the same time, the countless other blood beasts erupted with murderous auras and flew toward Jia Lai. Eyes snapped open down in the ocean water, and countless blood-colored giants rose up from the depths, howling as they surrounded Jia Lai. Jia Lai let out a blood-curdling scream, and tears streamed down his face. This isn't fair. You're cheating. Jia Lai wept at how the world around him was toying with him. As the blood beasts pounced, his screams echoed out far and wide. Bai Xiaochun's heart was trembling. The sudden outburst among the blood beasts had startled him so much that he almost took to flight. But then he realized that the blood beasts were merely attacking Jia Lai. He had been worried about Jia Lai in the beginning, but after realizing his own importance to the world around him, he stopped paying much attention to him. However, as of this moment, he started to feel a bit bad. When he heard Jia Lai accusing him of cheating, he coughed dryly but didn't attempt to make any explanations. After all, Jia Lai was actually right. After arriving in this world, he hadn't done a single thing except fly around. Even on the mountain, the blood beasts just let him pass by. Bai Xiaochun really felt that the world had treated him well. Looking back down at Jia Lai amidst the blood beasts, he considered throwing an aphrodisiac pill down. I shouldn't. I'm a good person, after all. Sighing, he proceeded on toward the peak of the mountain, where he found a stone stele, which emanated pulsing light that seemed to be calling to him. After some thought, he approached the stele and placed his hand onto its surface. Instantly, his divine sense seemed to spread out to fill the entire world. It was as if the world had somehow become a part of him. In that moment, the blood ocean began to seethe, the sands of the desert floated up into the air, the sky trembled, and the lands quaked. Plants, mountains, everything in the world began to shake with joy, with approval, with worship. The blood beasts kowtowed, roaring as they acknowledged allegiance to Bai Xiaochun standing there on the mountain. His life having been spared, Jia Lai trembled and looked up at Bai Xiaochun, and knew that he would never, ever be able to forget this experience, nor the image of Nightcrypt standing there like the emperor of the entire world. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.